What's that story you've never been able to tell? The time my mum needed to go back into the house to get a scarf. Because of this we were held back and missed a bus by 10 seconds. That bus then crashed into a bridge at very high speed because the bus driver had mental health problems. It is the closest I have ever been to death. I will never complain about my mum going back to get a scarf in my life again. My father seldom spoke of his wartime experiences. I've only heard 2 direct stories from his mouth. He once recounted how they fought together, was shot and later died from infection. The other memory was of his desertion. During a battle, he hurt his wrist from falling and sat there in the mud, wincing in pain and catching his breath. As he peered out, seeing all the death and destruction, he was suddenly hit with an intense feeling of futility. And not just mere futility, but he realized also the absurdity of it all. I got up and just walked away, he said, leaving my weapon right there on the ground. He disappeared into the surrounding woods, somehow managing to get back home, which was nearly 300 miles away. Weren't you worried about getting in trouble? I asked in all my childlike innocence. He explained that things were desperate by the time he entered the war. He was underage, so he lied about his name and age in order to enlist. He received little to no training and was immediately thrust into action. They had nothing on me, he said. I enlisted with little more than a handshake. Although he was ineligible to receive a pension because of his false and all lacking records, I'm under the impression he never would have accepted such. He was ashamed of that part of history and developed a profound distaste for government. This story was kept pretty hushed in our family as we didn't want the surrounding community to know of his desertion and label him a coward. I, however, always admired him for doing what he did. When I was 17 I was raped by the boy who lived up the street. When I finally got myself home I went to my dad and he yelled at me for not being home earlier. My phone got taken away and I was sent to my room. I couldn't even shower. I could never bring myself to tell him after that. I still never talk about it with anyone. When I was about 14 I found a slingshot in the woods. It was a pretty good slingshot that must have cost a fair bit as it had a metal frame and a thick rubber sling. One day my friend and I were on top of a hill out in the countryside and a jogger came running out of the nearby tree line. He was some distance away and below us. Without putting a lot of thought into it, I shot a stone just above his head. The rock went exactly where I wanted it to, but if there was wind, or my aim was off, or 1,000 other factors, I would have seriously fucked that jogger up. I muse on that at least once a week. I never see my friend and we haven't spoken about it since it happened. We were in Washington, D.C., on a university club trip. It was the middle of the night, and we had been out to bars, and we were then wandering around the reflecting pool totally alone. I felt as if I was in the abandoned Roman Forum. Everything was desolate and yet monumental, and there seemed only to be 3 of us in this vast place. Silently, in total bucolic peace among the soft Washington nighttime, we circumnavigated the pool. At its far end we met another delegation, a 20-person contingent from Orlando, and we were the only people at the Lincoln Memorial at 2 AM on a Friday night, a strange sensation. While they enjoyed the memorial my friend handed us pennies, and we stood 3 abreast, silently made wishes, and then unanimously made our sacrifices to the obelisk. Now for the fun part, my friend knew from experience that the memorial's flanks make a fun slide, and we took turns sliding down the staircase banisters, gleaning much joy, and wondering if this was perhaps the reason we fought the Civil War. These marble edifices that represented our nation's heart and soul were playthings to us, the spot where Vietnam protests occurred, and presidential speeches, and terrorist attacks. We just slid down and gallivanted up, and we were completely, utterly alone. At the end, we promised not to tell anyone about it. It would be our special secret. It was one of the best days of my life. For nearly 2 months this girl in a creative writing class I was in was the bane of my existence. I didn't really want to be in the class because I was originally in higher level classes and my precocious self was pissed off that I had to be in a lower level because of my poor grades from the previous year, but I was also somewhat fine with being in the lower level classes because I had a few friends in them. So basically this girl in the class came up to me and sat by me. There were desks for 2 in the room and I was sitting alone for mine because my friends already chose their seats. She smelled like salt water and had 30 pounds of makeup on her face. For almost all of the first 2 quarters she whined about how much she hated school and her parents. She talked everyone around me and criticized their appearances, flat out described why certain celebrities were ugly to her standards. Anne Hathaway wasn't white enough. Jessica Alba had some weird thing with her eyes. Frank Ocean wasn't straight. Talked about how her D's and F's didn't matter because she'd be a famous model and would always ask me if I thought she was pretty. Her vapidity was irritating. Eventually, she asked me if I get off to her and if I'd bang her. I decided that was the last straw. I flat out gave the most bland, idiotic, and confusing answers to her questions and made sure that she'd get irritated or bored with me. However, that wasn't it. On the day before the quarter ended, I told her that I didn't find her pretty because I'm gay. I'm not. No offense to gay people. She flat out avoided me for the rest of the semester. My dad grew up with a spider monkey. My grandmother was a waitress at a diner in West Mississippi, and one day she saw a couple of men with this monkey handcuffed to the hood ornament of their car. They were driving up and down the road scaring the shit out of the monkey, and when they finally stopped in the diner, grandma goes out, rips the hood ornament off, and takes the monkey. So, she carries the monkey home and not being aware that Monk is a pretty good climber, buds him in the pen with the hound dogs. Monkey can escape and does. His favorite thing to do was go across the street to my great grandmother's store and steal candy bars. She would chase him out with a broom most times, but one day the monkey gets wise and goes in the back, grabs the broom, shoos great granny out, and proceeds to feast on candy. This monkey loved my grandmother a whole lot, so he would try to help around the house. Mostly by getting into the chicken coop, shoving his hand up chickens' asses, ripping their guts out, and taking them to grandma. I also believe he was the inspiration for Jerry Clower's famous coon hunting monkey story. I laid down in the middle of Hialeah and said here. I laid down next to the Superdome and said here. I went to DC and laid down next to the Washington Monument and said Putin. I went to Wuhan and said here. I went to Area 51 and said they will come to help us with the infections. I spent a year working with the Stargate program and the CIA. App was proven to be viable. My brother and I were walking to school and he said he didn't want to go and wanted to fake being sick, so he told me to punch him in the back of his head and put some dirt on it so that he can say he had a headache and passed out. He did pass out before, in church. So I did it and he walked back home. Him back home now, and my mum is taking care of him in bed, and I just look at him and start laughing. Man, the stupid shit we did when we were younger. The night before my college graduation, my friend were walking back to the dorm at like 3 AM and were suddenly stopped by a very tipsy woman. We had no idea who she was, but she just went off on a rant about how one of the bartenders in the bar across the street is a sexist asshole and to never ever go there. The guy apparently berated her friend for having an abortion, and she was crying in the bathroom while this drunk woman was trying to find a phone to call for someone to pick them up. My friend stopped her and was like, "You left your friend, drunk and crying, alone in the bathroom?" And she said no, that her friend's boyfriend was with her. She said once more to us to never go to this bar, then stumbled off. My friend and I shared a look of "well, that happened," before continuing on our way. In 7th grade one night I was like, I really don't feel like going to school tomorrow, so I looked up how to get a fever. I found a tutorial that said to take a bath at the hottest temperature your bathtub will go, and then stay up all night. I decided to try it, and I started the water for a steaming hot bath. It stung to get in it, and I somehow survived it for 30 minutes. When I was getting out I felt dizzy and then I fell on the floor and had a seizure. I woke up and saw the blinding ceiling lights of the bathroom, and the first thing I thought was, am I dead? And then I threw up in the toilet next to me and had a migraine for the night, and later found out I got 1st-degree burns. So long story short, don't do that.